Kickayown? Kickayown?
However you want to say Kickayown.
That says Kickayown. 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 The Kickayown, or soul cannibal. Whoa. Hold on. Welcome to the edge of nowhere. Monster Lore Tour Podcast. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 57 of the Monster Lore Tour Paranormal Deep Dives from the Edge of Nowhere podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Carr, here along with my co-host and the ketchup on my hot dog.
Oh, boy.
Mr. Matt Ozero, a.k.a. the Moz. How we doing today, Moz?
No comment.
You didn't like that one? It's a little off format, but I figured for episode 57 we had to do something a little special with the ketchup.
Heinz 57.
There it is.
Yeah.
There
it's like we had the Rolling Rock 33. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I still hate it, but I get it. At least I understand a little.
That's all I ask. Knowing is half the battle.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are for part 2 of Owl Week. The big Hoot today, right?
Yes, the giant man-eating owl of legend.
Yeah, there you go. But first we did an episode, so of course we have old business. But I did misspeak in one spot. I said that Maleficent was Snow White's stepmother. She's actually Sleeping Beauty's stepmother.
Yeah.
They both end up sleeping and stuff. It
some
gets a
point,
little confusing.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally Sleeping Beauty's stepmother. But
yeah, I'm mad I didn't get that one, so you got me on a fairy tale.
Well, it was in the middle of a conversation. We kind of blew by it. Yeah. Occurred to me later.
Yeah, we'll wake her up later. You know.
And I do want to let everybody know that that Il-Silbone sour beer that we drank was very good.
Yeah, very interesting.
And I don't even usually like sours.
Yeah, he's sour enough.
Yeah. That's all my old business. You got anything, Moz? You ready to go?
I worked a couple things in to because we had a conversation last night, so I'm just going to get right to it.
Oh, you are hosting a multi-parter, so that makes sense.
Yes.
Sure. Weave it into the conversation.
There we go. That's the way to do it. So, hey, prerequisites, though, I would check out the first episode of this Flappy miniseries, The Monstrous Owl Mythos, a deep dive into this murky and mysterious archetype known as the owl. But otherwise, sit back, relax, and be prepared to, well, not to be relaxed. Today we're talking about Big Hoot and any of those man-eating owls among us. We won't be directly discussing Mothman, that is slated for its own episode a couple of weeks from now, but explain why we all need to help mitigate the West Virginia damage by filing Mothman under owl. But for tonight I shifted most...
You're just kind of getting everybody ready for that.
Yeah.
Just give it a little mention.
Yeah, well, I had a hard time getting these things as usual into the right buckets, but I shifted everything cryptoidy, shamanic, night shifty, witchy owl into the Mothman or some other episodes in the Clelland if it's UFO, because owl is more humanoid, had this humanoid aspect to it as well.
Yeah, from the get, I always thought that Mothman was actually an owl, even before you got in my brain, Moth.
Yeah. I think that should, it was unfortunate. So tonight we're just looking for large owls, not shamans, not moths, not alien owl hybrids, or anything involving depth psychology. So no mention of Neil Jungians, hopefully, or mass psychogenic
or
illness.
Bob Dylians or anyone
Bob
like
Dylians,
that.
Any of them. Good time to maybe explain the cryptid. We're looking for a cryptid tonight, which is actually something you could find in the woods as an exceptionally large version of an existing species or something unknown to science.
As you like to say, something you can actually throw a net over.
Correct. And cryptoid gets to be into these other camps, which unfortunately the field of cryptozoology gets very cryptoidy if you get into it. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a frustration. I even read an encounter between, I think, Ivan T. Sanderson and Lauren Coleman, that they got frustrated as well. It's just part of the nature of the beastie, as we call it. But tonight,
well done.
Old-fashioned cryptozoological hunt. Get the net ready.
All right, Big Hoot.
Yes. So if you're a large manning owl, today is your day. Crap, they come out at night. Well, you get the idea.
They only come out at night.
Yes. But here's some of the big Hoot hotspots for tonight's tour. We'll be talking Canada, the Caribbean, West Virginia, Ohio, Texas, the Ozarks in general, and even New Jersey, believe it or not. And I would add Disneyland, Jeremy. Why else do you think there's been 5 different voices for Mickey Mouse over the years?
Ooh.
Yeah, we don't talk about that darker side of Disney.
It would take a big hoot to take out Mickey Mouse.
Exactly. But I also think, speaking of cartoons, they also leave out the goat. I was thinking about that last night. Pan, Faunus, Baphomet, and Baal. These things get associated with goats. Another ones that get neglected. So I think I am going to work on that Goatman episode and take back the goat a little bit. But I want to take back the owl this month from its mothy lair. I think we need to fear the owl, but importantly, learn from it. Learn from those fears as well. So goat and owl seem to be blocked. We figured it out after we shut the mics off last night. Why this seems to be.
Oh, with the owl not coming up either, yeah. The goat getting blocked out like the owl does, yeah.
They resemble the evil or death so closely that I think folks from literature and other folks might be blocking them out. I mean, we even have an owl monster, and we turned it into a moth.
Yeah.
Denial just isn't a hieroglyph that looks forward and directly into your soul, Jeremy.
Oh, I did forget old business. There is an owl horror movie from 2014 that I did not know about.
Nice.
We're going to have to watch that.
Nice. Well, you also made a connection last night when the mics were off about, which I thought was interesting, the tattoo on the wrist. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. With the, we were editing, so we heard the conversation again. And we heard the part about how Athena had the little owls on her wrists. And then later on, we heard about how the Native Americans get the tattoos on their wrists that correspond a lot to the owl or of the owl. Oh. And I was like, wait, do those come from the same place?
Yeah.
Like, do these guys know Lilith?
Yeah. It's another interesting connection there that I did not make. I do have some historical accounts of owl species, pretty large wingspan-wise. But from there, we will head into the land of legend. I have to say, in reviewing the old tribal accounts and the global mythos, more of these stories tend to be, again, witchy owl, therianthropic, chimeric, or alien UFO abductee. Therefore, finding simply giant owls was a bit of a bear, which is also not an owl, but a flashback factoid from last time.
I have fought owl bears.
There you go.
They're no pushover, man.
There you go. Is that in a US file I'm not aware of?
That's a Dungeons and Dragons reference. I'm sorry. I'm nerding out on you.
Gotcha. Well, paranerdalist, so you're in the right place. But flashback factoid from last time, as we mentioned, from the fossil records, owls have been around for about 60 million years, and they haven't changed much in that period. And there's 216 species of owls in the world today. They are everywhere, except Antarctica, where there's almost nothing. For our living in large segment, the owl wingspan rarely tops 5 feet in North America. And Big Hoot, with crazy large wingspan, sports a wingspan of up to 30 feet or more.
Whoa.
That's on the top end. A lot of them tend to be these 10, 12 kind of, or 16 foot. But
30 puts it in like Bat Squatch territory.
Yeah, there get to be some really big ones.
Is Bat Squatch actually just an owl?
Well, that's what I say. There's a lot of things that overlap. And we're going to find this triangle of, even when you go over, jumping ahead to Chicago, I reviewed all the stuff from Mothman in Chicago, and you've got more bat-like, you've got more owl-like, or you've got just more big bird-like. There always seems to be this triangulation of sightings for whatever reason. But for living in large and in charge here, the owl wings, we're looking at possibly the Strix or the Bobo family of the owl, because they're the biggest. Honestly, Strix lost me after Mr. Roboto, that rock opera thingy, but, it's all good.
Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto.
Don't even do that.
Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto.
I'm so making a Kokomo joke in there somewhere. From the living in large side, there are some monster owl species that get pretty darn big. The Eurasian eagle owl, Bobo, upwards of 6 feet wingspans, and the Blakiston's fish owl, Bobo blackstoni, can top 6 feet sometimes, but that hails from Siberia. So maybe the Tecumseh blast had something to do with the giant owl. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
As for Titanic and Toast, largest in the fossil record that I came across was Ornimegalonyx, Ornimegallonyx. I'll put a pin in that because we're going to be moving that to our theory section. But the bones suggest it stands 3 feet 7 inches tall or more. That is a giant owl, not a 4-foot wingspan, nearly 4 feet tall. Whether it could fly or not, well, we'll get to that when we get to theories. But
a 4-foot tall owl would have much bigger than 5-foot wingspan then, right? Wouldn't it be more like 8?
Not necessarily, just because we'll get to that in the theories, but it seems like it was more dodo-like where it might not have flew.
Oh, okay.
So we will get to that. I did do a little newspaper archive hunt for this one to see if there are any large specimens out there flapping about town, or at least larger varieties. But the newspaper reports fell within expected parameters, but sometimes only barely. And they did give us some clues about our quarry, so I'm going to go over them tonight. Whether I put them in the show notes, I don't know if it's interesting enough, maybe, to be determined.
Okay.
But in the Kennebunk Journal, 1975, a woman was attacked by an owl with a 4-foot wingspan in Augusta, Maine. And a 4.4-inch owl attacked and injured a hunter in Central City, Colorado, back in 1899. A 4.5-foot wingspan owl was shot in Umatilla County in 1904 while robbing a liquor store. I felt that just needed a different, cooler ending. So I added that part.
You got me. Yeah. You should have let me ask the question.
The Bridgestone Pioneer reports a 5-foot owl was shot in the Catskills in 1893. That was owl-on-owl violence. In 1856, a Warren, Ohio paper reported a 5-foot owl sighting. The Jackson Standard in 1852 in Ohio reports an owl carcass that measured 5 feet 6 inches tip to tip.
Wow.
That is edging towards the monstrous, but still within known species lengthage-wise, but barely for that area, for
Dude,
sure.
let me tell you, I've seen some big owls. An owl that big?
Yeah, it's scary.
Man, a human-sized owl would be so frightening to have flying at you.
Yes. But nothing in the news made the cryptozoological highlight reel, so actually, we'll see if it shows up in the show notes. But as they say in Monster Quest, when the team really strikes out, our investigation made some interesting discoveries. That's your cue that they didn't find anything. Wah. But it does tell me a couple of things about these giant owls. Most of the larger sightings are older, and sometimes the newspapers tend to exaggerate back then, so there is that piece. But when big ones did make the news, they are often aggressive towards humans, and that's how they make the news. And seeing a large owl either attacking or dying of a gunshot wound was news back then, and they did mention these things.
Sure.
We have an upcoming highlight story regarding a monster flap owl sighting in New York, wherein a 6-foot owl wingspan terrorized a section of the Bronx at the turn of the century.
Whoa.
This is, again, on the edge of known species, but it
of which century?
Well, it would be, the 1899 kind of things.
Oh, okay.
So when we get to that, I'll get the exact year. But it was big news because it was a big bird, yet that is still within scientific wingspan lengths. Upper limits,
That's definitely an outlier, though. 6-foot wingspan. That's
for this
huge
area,
owl.
For this area. The biggest existing creatures of all we keep talking about, you find the biggest one. Hogzilla is the one that blew my mind when those guys shot this monstrous pig, and they dug it up and found the bones and did estimate it could have been an 800-pound version. Oh. So we do have the cryptids exist. The giant squid is always the favorite because we found that it existed.
Didn't exist until it did.
Yep, exactly. So, and your friend's iguana story comes to mind.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly,
it was huge,
you told how big you thought it was.
It really was 6 feet long.
And that is the maximum that those grow.
Yeah.
But if you see, I saw a 3-foot chuckwalla in the desert one time, and I thought that was a frighteningly large.
Yeah.
So something more than double that size.
Well, they grow to their environment and their diet, and he gave it all the room it wanted and fed it endless food. So made it, with an easy life like that, they can grow to be outliers.
But the biggest ones of any species get monsters, and we're looking for that biggest of owls today. Some of the commonalities for the owl counts: sound. They make so many different sounds. They are mistaken for a variety of monsters, from banshees to aswang. And they're named for these calls as well, part of that onomatopoeia thing we were talking about on the mythos side. Great horned owls make the most, and that's the ones by us, the ones we've seen.
Yeah, they're by far the most common around here.
But they also make 3. They make clicking, screeching, and hooting, apparently. In fact, much of the superstition is attached to the hoot itself, or the screech. And if you remember, screech owl was associated with Lilith, and the barn owl was associated with Lechuza. So we'll probably get to that next time. But eyes usually described as red due to extra blood vessels, so eye shine can be exacerbated naturally.
Oh, so maybe that explains the mirror eyes we heard about.
There you go. There you go. And they have a brownish yellow hue normally. Color for the giant variety, there's no difference in color reported than typical browns, although when shopping for an owl, remember you can just do the brown suit thing. But when we get to the alien end of it, there are more whiter and grayer ones kind of out of place, kind of like your story, Jeremy. When I first wrote this, you didn't have an owl abduction story, but we'll get to that.
No, that's recent.
I know. But the other one had a white owl in the desert that you did share already. But odor, nothing unusual reported odor-wise, with the exception of in West Africa, there's one that reportedly smells like a dead snake, which is interesting. Talons, typical owl-like. Mothman or the Cornwall owlman describes more of a crab-like bifurcated talon sometimes, which I think just might be when you get giant talons, what they seem to resemble. 4 on one side, one big opposable claw. I think it might look crab-like if they get big enough. Locomotion and speed. The largest variety of owl may not have flown at all, as we shall see, as I hinted to.
Like emus and dodos.
There you go. But Mothman and Bigfoot seem to have taken to the skies regularly, swooping off bridges, buildings, buzzing muscle cars, all that good stuff. Otherwise, they don't seem to have any. They seem to fly like owls can be fast. So there's no, like with the skin
walker.
It's a humanoid moving like an animal really fast, or even faster than an animal. Yeah. The owl seems to be regular flight. I don't think there's like super speeds associated with these beasts.
They're just silent.
They're silent.
Keep coming back to that, but I think that's what makes them scary is the silence.
Yep. And how to kill or ward off, assuming Big Hoot is a bird. Any bullets, silver or otherwise, should do the trick. Outside of shapeshifters, they should be vulnerable to conventional weapons, as we'll talk about in our best defense, which is one of our fun segments. We're going to do a little global giant owl sighting sweep, or swoop, I guess, before hitting up the North American tribal folklore. Then we have some highlight Big Hoot stories, which could get the feathers standing on the back of your necks, hopefully. So global giant owls. This is one of the main, that I mentioned already, the Cornwall owlman sighting, which you've heard from England. This is, often associated with Mothman, but since it just looked like a big owl, I put it here in Big Hoot tonight. This from just basic old Wikipedia to get kind of our talons wet a little bit. We'll have Jeremy read the first account.
I knew you were going to say that. Hold on. The story originated when Tony Doc Shields, who had been involved in a series of monster-raising exploits in 1976, claimed to have investigated a report of 2 young girls on holiday in Monon who saw a large winged creature hovering above the tower of St. Monon and St. Stephen's Church, Monon, on 17 April 1976. According to most versions of the story, the girls, identified as June and Vicky Melling, were so frightened by the sight of a large feathered bird man that their father Don immediately cut short their family holiday after hearing their tale. According to Shields, one of the girls provided him with a drawing of the creature, which he dubbed Owl Man. The story was subsequently related in a pamphlet entitled Morgar, the Monster of Falmouth Bay, by Anthony Monon Peller, which circulated throughout Cornwall in 1976. According to Shields, Owl Man was reported again on 3 July by 2 14-year-old girls identified as Sally Chapman and Barbara Perry, who were aware of the Owl Man tale. According to the story, the 2 girls were camping when they were confronted by a big owl with pointed ears as big as a man, with glowing eyes and black pincer-like claws. Sporadic claims of Owlman sightings in the vicinity of the church circulated in 1978, 79, 89, and 95. And according to legend, a loud owl-like sound could be heard at night in the Mullion churchyard during the year 2000. Just keeps on giving.
So again, that's in Wikipedia. And again, even the biggest owl sightings tend to have that humanoid component, so it's tough to tell, where to stick some of these. So I did it based on, we're going to get more just owl sightings as we move on. But I struggled with this because everything seemed to have either a humanoid component or a mystical component. But
Right.
We'll see how I struggled. But we do have some just big owls. I promise they're there. But again, also associated.
Well, I mean, it kind of plays into the whole thing that they're not really what they seem when, they get big enough and they stop seeming owl anymore.
Yeah.
They start
You
seeming
just
other
think
things.
it's a man because of the size. I mean, even owl,
Yeah.
even Mothman just seems like a big owl, but the size of it, you call it a man because it's man size.
Because it's man-sized, and that's a scary animal when
Yes.
it gets as big as us. Because
Yes.
we're supposed to be big.
Yeah, but I have a premature Mad Cujo's already,
Oh.
I think. Don Melling, the dad. I mean, how many fathers on this planet would say, well, little June and Vicky, they hand him this picture of a man-eating owl. He's like, well, vacation's over, I guess. And
Let's get out of
let's
here,
get
kids.
out of here, kids. These kids handed him a drawing, and he ended the family. He's a molder. I mean, we got to give him some credit for that. He believed the kids. It is a story they stand by and stick by, and he ended his
What's
vacation.
his name again?
Don Melling.
Don Melling.
Ended the Melling family vacation based on drawings handed by his kids.
Mad Cujo's Don. Mad Cujo.
Or the other theory is English dads just really missed the neighborhood pub. Now, we don't know the backstory to this, but we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that. He's a
Fair
believer.
enough.
And in the April
I can
17th,
feel that. That's good, Mad Cujo's. I feel that.
Yeah, exactly. And that other account, Eberhart also covers in his stuff, that 1976-78 study with the French girls. If you want to read that in Eberhart's Bestiary, he covers that as well. But Wikipedia did a good overview of it. Moving to Africa, the Kikione is an owl-like cryptid plaguing the Bambara tribe of West Africa, which brings us to Jeremy's second reading.
Ooh, that was quick. The Kikione, or soul cannibal, is one of the most terrifying and at the same time one of the least seen and understood of all the forest creatures. Its very name can conjure a look of horror. It is best described as resembling a large owl, especially its head. It has a huge beak and raking talons on its arms and feet. In many respects, it is a mixture of bird and human. The Bambara people say it has a huge pair of feathered wings which grow from its back, the shoulder joint of which is tipped with a sharp spur, a deadly weapon if its talons fail. The most terrifying feature is the presence of razor-sharp talons, much like those of a large owl, at the end of well-muscled legs. Kikione is said to be covered in short, greenish-gray hair, and some reports speak of it having a short, tufted tail. The smell of the Kikione is said to resemble that of a dead snake that has lain in the sun too long. Whoa. The Kikione is the denizen of the darkest forest. It rarely ventures from the gloom, and despite its ferocious appearance, it contents itself with ambushing travelers who are desperately trying to get home before darkness falls. The Kikione is usually heard before it is seen, and those who see it and live usually die of some lingering illness, if not from shock at the time. It is a deadly adversary, being capable of outrunning a man or even swooping down on its prey. At the same time, it is an ephemeral being, seemingly able to move between the physical and dream realms with ease. It is equally feared in both spheres, though in the latter there appears to be more chance of escape. People tell of dreams where the Kikione has appeared and chased the dreamer but failed to catch them.
And that from cryptidsfandom.com, cryptids with a Z. That will be in the show notes.
And there we go with the dream again. That goes back and forth between the waking and dream states.
You have to bring that in, don't you, to make me sad. I struggled finding I found a big owl always then had that fear component that kind of gets mixed in there, you know.
Well, it's the lore, the global lore you went through in part one.
Yeah,
that's what it said. Like, there you go. It's going to be hard to get away from because that's just what it is.
I agree. Although on the Scully Muggle side, they think it might be a giant Pell's fishing owl. And I think because it's something that's just this big owl in the darkest jungle, there is a chance that it started from a more cryptid perspective. But yes, there's this Australian dream time, this soul cannibalism, this dream component to it that we can't get away from, this humanoid component to it we can't get away from.
The soul cannibal phrase is going to stick with me, I think.
Hey, if our band doesn't work out, we have another option for a
Soul
band.
Cannibals.
Soul
That's a
Cannibals.
great metal band.
There you go.
Soul Cannibals.
Yeah. If we have like flowers and hippie stuff, I don't think it would work so much.
No, we got Rothfunkel and Oates.
Yeah.
First album coming soon.
Yeah. Our bands, we keep getting kicked out of bands, actually. That's another story. Hey, but we discussed the Batty Bat demon class from Philippine folklore and the global succubi marahag phenomenon. Do come back into this. You mentioned it. Hypnagogic action figure. This is the owl version.
There you go.
Keep it in the case, kids, because then it's worth more later.
Yep.
But also, like most monsters, it's associated with illness and lingering death. So that component showed back up again. The Bantu, another tribe from Africa, speak of the Lyokokoli, which is like the Ricola, lives in the Alps and blows a large horn at travelers during throat loss and commercials. Exactly. No one's going to get our jokes, but that's okay. It's okay. And this from owls.
That does date us a bit, I guess. Huh? That one right there.
Yes. But this from owls in lore and culture, which will be in the show notes. The Bantu's Licola, or it's Lyokokoli, is how it's, I guess, pronounced properly, quote, is not Lingala, but instead a local dialect, as there is no Lingala word for this, which is very rare and appears once every 40 to 50 years. It has a long wail call that increases in pitch. It is not exactly an owl, but is described as owl-like. Again, they don't have a word for it. Why? Because people only want to talk about this stuff again. I think that's part of what we talked about. They don't even want to name it. It's like, I don't even want to name this thing. Just don't talk about it. Didn't happen.
It is he who will not be named.
He who should not be named. It is much feared and is not even named. And this was a cool account. Back jumping away from Africa to New Jersey, which is a wonderful transition.
Interesting.
If I was a DJ, that would have been a horrible segue.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you got to go to a lot of places in between there.
That's true. But there's a giant Jersey owl called the woo-woo that I found in Eberhart's bestiary. It looks like he found it maybe in Mark Hall's Thunderbird. I'll have to check on that. But this creature lives along the Kittatinny Mountain, emitting, quote, a sound that grew in intensity and then faded away. What's cool about this account is it comes from crypto great Ivan T. Sanderson, who thought due to the loudness, it must be a giant owl. So if it's good enough for Ivan T. Sanderson, it's like Randolph Scott when you mention Ivan T.
Randolph Scott.
You know, that's when we should do that for Ivan T. Sanderson.
I have a picture of his star in the Walk of Fame.
Wow.
Randolph Scott.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But Ivan T. Sanderson would be cooler for this podcast, but, you know, that's still pretty cool, I guess. But also in Mike Clelland's book, The Messenger's Owl, Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee, there's an account from a Miss Canon who describes an owl big enough to, quote, look over the hood of the car.
That's big.
Yes, this account shifts alien words pretty quickly, so more of that when we cover that side of the whole genre. But it starts off, as a lot of these, as a regular giant owl. There's a great variety of giant owl tales spread out across Native American folklore, but there's definitely a concentration of one particular story of a giant owl that carries around a basket with which to carry off and eat children. Ooh. We discussed this briefly in our Mythos episode. It does sound like, the typical bogey story to frighten children.
Yeah,
and
very
some tales,
Krampus-y.
Yep, and some tales seem, from that vein, certainly accounts of, but some of the accounts have the children and the adults in thrall, and that's the ones we really want to focus on. One of the scarier versions come from the Shuswap, Okanagan, and surrounding tribes of the Pacific Northwest, near that lake where Ogopogo goes clubbing. Here's a story from Okanagan country of that giant owl. Brings us to Jeremy's third reading, and this one is from Giant Owls in Canada, Mysteries of Canada. mysteriesofcanada.com.
South of Shuswap territory is the fertile wooded land of the Okanagan Indians. According to folklorists Nancy Perkins Wincoop and N. Winnacloop Clark, in their 1985 book In the Stream, an Indian Story, the Okanagan believed that an owl-like monster very much resembling the Howler of Stony legend once haunted the forests of southern British Columbia. This creature was said to be half as tall as the trees and to emit a horrible screech when agitated. Its head and neck resembled that of an owl. Its shoulders and arms were vaguely human-like and grotesque in their appearance. The body, the folklorists wrote, resembled a bear, while the legs, feet, and hands were the shape of an eagle's claw. The whole creature was covered with wool, scales, feathers, and hair, with a great mane of bristles that he raised and dropped as he chose. Like other owl monsters of First Nations legend, this creature was said to carry a woven basket for the purpose of hauling children, deer, and other tender meats of the land.
Yikes.
That kind of sounds like an owl bear from D&D.
Yep. Giant owls in Canada.
Now I'm glad I mentioned it.
Mysteriesofcanada.com.
That's a freaky beast right there, man.
Well, it mentioned here because sometimes they describe it as an owl half the size of trees, and that's why it makes Big Hoot. But it does, yes. The ending version is a little cryptoidy, chimeric-y, and bogey.
Yeah.
But there's an associated fear with this that goes beyond the fairy tale. Again, that scares when they mention Howler, that's one that in particular, that's like the skin
walker.
It's scaring the adults as well. And if something frightens the adults, I think like Aerosmith tells us, we put the boogie to sleep, I think if it's something that's scaring everyone, there's a lot of the bogey that keep the kids away from the dangerous areas. But if the adults are actually frightened of it, we have something else potentially going on.
Right.
But yes, I moved most of this to Lechuza again when we talk about women shapeshifters of the Southwest, because anything shapeshiftery ended up getting kind of swept over to the Lechuza front. Moving to Vancouver Island legends, and still from MysteriousCanada.com, comes this quote: "The Quackatol, or KWAK doohickey WAKW, who once dominated Vancouver Island's northeastern shores, had their own ideas about owls, which echoes that of the Western Canadian tribes. In his 1932 essay on the beliefs of the Quackatol, the aforementioned anthropologist Franz Boas wrote, 'The owl go-go-go is believed to attack young children.'" So Franz Boas was one of the first guys, studying the folklore and hitting it from an anthropological perspective.
Right.
1930s, kind of one of the greats back then. Even he came across these stories of Indian tribes telling him of giant owls. And you can't think Big Hoot without thinking the Apache legend of the Big Owl. We touched on this last time, which brings us to a Apache Big Owl story from courtesy of Jeremy.
Nope.
Actually, courtesy of Theresa Bane's bestiary, but courtesy of Jeremy reading it.
All right. In Apache mythology, Big Owl is a gigantic owl whose description varies according to tradition. Among the Chiricahua and the Mescalero Apache, it is an evil giant. To the Jacarillo Apache, he is an owl cannibal with the ability to paralyze humans with his evil stare. His cry caused fear in everyone who heard it, and his voice was like thunder causing things to quake. The White Mountain Apache claim Big Owl is son of the sun and brother of their cultural hero, He. When He was slain, his body hit the earth, sending his feathers flying off in every direction. These feathers transformed into the owls which now live in the forests. The guy's name is He. Mm-hmm. It's not a pronoun. I just wanted to clarify that.
And also from the Apache, we've got, like most of our global mythos, an owl package, from owl dreams equals death omens. We see that theme again from them. And they also had a Big Owl legend that, it also is more of a, again, you just read it, can shapeshift into a giant. It also has that whole piece of it where it's mythical because there's feathers being transformed into whole owls. So it's got that mythic component to it again.
The capital O owl from which all owls came.
Yes, exactly. So, and here's where all roads for this hunt seem to lead to Mark A. Hall. Most giant owl leads come from his chapter in Thunderbirds Living Legends, called Big Hoot was the chapter particularly about big owls. Very short but packed chapter that actually gives this beastie its rightful name and was the inspiration for this episode. I read this book when I was about 19 years old, and I remember the Big Hoot chapter, really kind of enthralled me in particular. In Mark Hall, he quotes J.O. Dorsey, who claims the Omahas and the Poncas tribe had a monster owl in their midst called the In-dag-dhin-ga that could, quote, pull up large trees by the roots. And, quote,
whoa.
Yeah, J.O. Dorsey's 1885 describes this creature as, quote, a monster in human shape with long hair. So, again, we immediately get off the owl again, which frustrates me. But he makes reference to the fact that this thing hoots like an owl. All the descriptions I could find are really not bird or owl-like, except for this reference of it, if anyone knows more. In fact, it looks more like, from the description, it looks more like Captain Caveman, which you would have to go way back to the early Hanna-Barbera era kids to understand that reference.
Who could fly, by the way.
He
could
right.
fly.
Yeah, we're getting close. We're on the track now. But the same area of the Midwest comes the Sitikini, C-T-I-N-I-K-E, the Sitiniki, a variation of the Ishtiknik, which we talked about last week. Sometimes he's called monkey-like, and that's the translation. The Ikniki is the trickster figure of the Omaha and the Ponca, same general tribe in that region. But this trickster figure is son of the sun god, but he gets himself exiled to Earth for, being a typical trickster. He has adventures and gets in all kinds of trouble. More importantly, this episode, the trickster monster is associated with the owl. To the Choctaw, the giant owl is also called, like we talked about last week specifically, the Ishkatini. And this is related to Dorsey's, is this, I guess they ask, related to Dorsey's In-dag-dhin-ga mentioned in Hall? Anyone knows more of this owl lore? Let us know at monsterloretour@gmail.com. But anyway, the screech of the Ishkatini screech means sudden death, and it prowls at night for the flesh of men. Or it means Jeremy got a text, right? Ishkatini.
That's Utidi.
Utidi. And that from Choctaw Legends and Stories, Mike Boucher's webpage, and that will be in the show notes. Isn't it funny, though, how it mimics... It also, we jumped over this. There's one of the story before, it can paralyze, which also so many of these creatures, again, on the shapeshiftery realm, can paralyze, like the Kushtaka and the Earrak and these things that can disorient.
Yeah. And jumping ahead on you again, that plays into the whole UFO connection as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. Let's stop. This is making me sad.
Yeah.
Because it is what it is. But the monsters of the night from the
you just want the pure owl monster. That's just a big old man-eating owl.
Yeah,
that's all you
struggled.
Want. That's just an owl, not other things at the same time.
Yep.
The problem is nothing is ever one thing.
Yeah.
Especially in this realm.
Yeah. But we will get to why. There's some big owl highlights. There's a big owl in the past. Kept the story to keep Mark Hall happy about big owls, and we're going to get through it.
Okay, good.
But when we discuss Lilith, remember, the monster of the night from the Kabbalah resurfacing as the screech owl in Isaiah, as we talked about last week. Mentioning it by name, it's the same idea as the skin
walker.
It's frowned upon, and it stirs up, all this attention of the beast, and it can kind of come get you. They described as a shape-shifting witch who vomits up their souls as to gradually allow the transformation into an owl. So, yes.
Ooh, you got to vomit out your soul.
Yes.
Ooh.
So the Stinkini goes by the way of Lechuza, away from Big Hootie, and we shifted kind of the rest of that into
harkens
Lechuza.
Back to the soul cannibals I read about just a little while ago.
Yeah, there you go. But basically all that stuff kind of ended a little witchy owl, so we kind of shifted a little bit. But here was a sighting with just a giant owl, so we're going to get to these. 2006, Tecumseh, Oklahoma. Again, same area as these tribes, and it's associated with these same. They call it the same creature, as we will see. This from the Fortean researcher Lon Strickler, and brings us to Jeremy's fifth reading.
The uncle brought out night vision goggles and zoomed in all the way. After a few seconds, we seen a really large owl hop under the streetlight. It continued to hop and look around for about a minute and then turned around. The stikini spread its wing and took off. The wingspan covered the entire width of the road. For perspective, 3 cars could fit side by side from curb to curb. I wish my uncle would have brought a cassette to record the event. What cassette? This is old.
Yep. Well,
that's like a VCR word.
There you go. That was from Phantoms and Monsters, Real Cryptid Encounter Reports. It does say it was from 2020, but when it was written, when the account actually occurred, I will probably have to add to old business because I'm looking through here and it doesn't say the time of the account. But the uncle makes the connection between the stikini. Just sees a giant owl. Again, wingspan tip to tip could go across the road.
3 car widths. Yeah. That's getting on 20 feet maybe.
Yep. So a lot of these started with giant owl sightings. This is thankfully one of them. It didn't turn into anything else, so we can talk about it today. But here's Mark Hall again, back to his Big Hoot chapter, finding a Joseph Wherry Shoshone lead. Quote, the lore of the Shoshone Indians of the American West said to carry off men for food. The Hohok, with Joseph Wherry identifies as spirit bird of the mountains in the Pacific Northwest, may be the giant owl's parallel in symbolism to the thunderbird in that area. That's not surprising. The bird and the shaman are inextricably linked again. Big bird sightings can be mistook for owls or eagles or condors or thunderbirds, that last one being the mythical variety. But those are your main culprits when they talk about these things. This one was more above. The last version was more stikini. But at the same time, it does kind of overlap. What did I just see? Was this a mystical, important thing for my vision quest, or did I just see a giant, large bird?
Or was it just a big damn bird?
Just a big dang bird. But the Shoshone lead also dried up, by the way. And, so if there's any more on that, monsterloretour@gmail.com. Mark Hall also mentions the flying head. He believes there might be a connection between this creature and the Big Hoot. He points to the, quote, hairy and fiery eyes, possibly being the red eye shine of common to owls when they talk about the flying head. This we talked about when we talked about the Monongal.
Yeah.
So we've got this, kind of overlap.
That is definitely the flying head that I think of.
Yep. And this is likely another reason they get a bad rap mythologically. Creatures with red eye shine, often associated, as we know, with the shapeshifter side of things.
Right.
There's booger owls. This is mentioned in Mark Hall as well. It's not related to bogey. It's not the boogeyman.
Okay.
The booger owl is just the way pioneers of when the white men settled this area, when they saw a giant 10 to 12 foot wingspan owl, they called it a booger owl. And these were seen all over the Ozarks from Missouri to Oklahoma. These do seem to be just giant owl sightings, but finding specific accounts, again, proved difficult. But here's Mark Hall again from his Thunderbird book. Quote, West Virginia is the location of encounters with giant owls, which turned up earlier in the folklore of the Midwestern Ozarks. West Virginia doesn't have owl-related folklore, but some reports are best explained by the presence of Big Hoot, a truly gigantic owl still known only to the chance observers of this creature of the night. So even that, he had to it sounds like a giant owl.
Yeah, you got to coax it out.
Yep. Hall also recounts some of James Gay Jones's work collecting Appalachian folklore, wherein a number of giant owl sightings were reported up and down the creeks of West Virginia, particularly around the town of Point Pleasant.
Really?
Things that make you go, right?
That made me go, real quick.
So at the end of his chapter, Hall claims that everything since the 1960s gets lumped in with Mothman, which I agree with him is a disservice to the cryptozoological efforts elsewhere. And moths who someday want to have their own monster, like Mothra.
Right.
You're also shitting on the moths a little bit.
Yeah. They've had Mothra for a long time, those guys.
Exactly. But we'll be talking more about Mark A. Hall when we get to his theories, and we'll also talk about more when we get to Thunderbirds.
I just had a thought.
Go ahead.
Did we call it Mothman because we're too afraid to recognize the fact that it's an owl? Goes back to our subconscious fear of the symbology of it.
You're stealing my Thunderbird, man. I mean, my Thunder story, Thunderbird.
Okay, let's go.
Yes. But Mark Hall is somebody that I would like to give a provisional Mad Cujos today because Big Hoot is really the inspiration for this, but I'd rather do it when we talk about Thunderbirds. So do we have a provisional Mad Cujos? Like in golf, you do a shot and it might count later.
Roof, down boy. How's that? Is that good?
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
Little preliminary.
There you go. But or maybe play the bumper softer, like quick to the bad shit signal. Something like that.
I'll just play it.
All right. Down boy. There you go. He really deserves the award for all things crypto-ornithoid. His book was probably the first of the genre that I ever read, and it's still one of my faves. He made most of the connections we discussed today and coined the phrase Big Hoot. I mean, we have to give it to him, really.
There you go. Yeah, he's got to get one then.
And I agree with him also on how we've Mothmanned everything ever since, So Mayor Gorbachev kind of tear down that statue in the middle of Point Pleasant there. But this brings us...
Because moths are cute and owls are scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I have a feeling it was just a bias, a cultural bias as to how we named Mothman.
It was a journalistic moment, but of course we go with those things in part because we are afraid to deal with the actual archetype and the truth. Yeah. And we're going to solve this thing by the time we get to Clelland. We'll see what happens. But highlight stories or featured encounters, I have a couple of actual Big Hoot large owl sightings. And I'm going to add John Keel to this mix with his Mothman prophecies. He has a highlight story that I plucked from his book, and it's just about a big owl, and it brings us to Jeremy's 6th reading.
There are shaggy bird stories by the pound. A businessman in Arlington, Virginia wrote me recently describing an experience he and 3 friends had in the winter of 1968 to 69. They were at a farm near Haymarket when they heard a strange rushing sound near a small lake. Intrigued, they set out with flashlights and a couple of dogs to investigate. Suddenly, the dogs howled, turned tail, and ran. There, standing by a tree, was a huge dark shadow between 8 and 12 feet tall. The quartet scurried back to their car, turned on their lights, and swung toward the shadow. All we saw, he reported, was this huge thing with large red-orange eyeballs and wing-like arms. We couldn't get out of there fast enough. It's Bat Squatch.
Well, it could be anything, but that was from John Keel's Mothman prophecies. But again, if you take the Mothman out of this, they're just describing what could be a large owl or Bat Squatch. Yeah, there's a lot it could be.
But it could just be a big old owl.
Yep. But our second highlight feature, this one comes from the New York Times article, 1904. This is kind of, wrapped into the whole owl lore. This is the headline. It's a little awkward. Doings in Laurelin Lane helmets, battered and clothes torn by a Bronx. What is it? The Bronx, what is it?
What is it? What a great name for a cryptid.
Why it's a burrow, which is actually a donkey. Now, those can be dangerous. Here's the start of that New York Times article. Quote, Acting Captain Wilson of the Bronx Park Police Station last night asked the superintendent of the zoological gardens to try to take into custody a big brown owl, which for the past 3 weeks has been scaring the policemen who were assigned to Post 16, which is one of the most lonely posts in the gloomy old Bronx precinct. So that was the edge of civilization back then of the boroughs. Here's Officer Patrick J. Hickey, same article, ... It's not an owl, it's a devil with wings. Sure, I know an owl when I see one, but no man ever seen an owl with a wings 6 feet wide. And its whoos like ghosts in a graveyard, too, when it's not growling beneath its breath. Why, man, he's no owl, he's a devil, and I'm going to get transferred. That guy got transferred on purpose, and his replacement also had a run-in with this feathery beast. Accounts seem to be split during this flap between those who think it was simply a giant owl with an estimated 6-foot wingspan, and others who had more of a supernatural slant. By the way, when I spoke earlier, I think I misspoke. When we talk about Chicago sightings, it was between bat, gargoyle, and owl. was
Ooh, gargoyle.
And the reason
nice.
I'm remembering this is because this one also, some of the speculation at the time, some felt it was more gargoyle than giant owl. And it's the same with the Chicago Mothman. Those are the three. We seem to triangulate between a few beasties all the time.
Yeah.
Like with the Yeti, it was, whether it was a wild man, an ape, or a bear.
Right, right.
Same idea. Some of the speculation at the time, some felt was more gargoyle than giant owl. One police officer described both a winged slim man, like a slender man thing going on, and a winged mountain dwarf, or more bat squatchy, was also encountered.
Winged mountain dwarf.
Yep, only later did people make that Mothman connection. So when you search Mothman, you kind of get to this giant owl. It's an interesting sighting and flap from turn of the century New York City, West Virginia in the 60s and the Chicagos, and then the 90s and beyond. This was kind of where, in some ways, where it started, because this was the first in this area flap from an area. Except, I guess, you could go back to the booger owls of the Ozarks. But I guess in a city, this is the first more recent start of some of these flaps.
Right.
But for 3 weeks in the Bronx, a Bronx that was way more remote back then, a 6-foot owl terrorized the neighborhood, and it terrorized several policemen, which I think make it a more, they don't want to mention that stuff and lose their jobs or their pensions. So when they do, it brings a little bit more credence to some of this stuff.
Disclosure now, man.
Yep.
Stop hiding it.
And
we got to deal with this stuff.
Yep. And this from the New York Times article of 1904, so that will be in the show notes. Timmins, Ontario sighting is our next one. There's also a giant owl of Timmins, Ontario, and an article in the Pittsburgh Press from 1951, which claims a bear oil salesman by the name of Chamandy put a $100 bounty on a giant owl that was harassing his livestock. One description from that flap describes this thing as, quote, avian colossus with huge talons, a hooked beak, jet black feathers, and the likeness of an owl with a wingspan of about 9 feet. He eventually upped the bounty to $150, wanted dinner alive, and opened for Bon Jovi during that music festival that summer. And that was also from Giant Owls in Canada, mysteriesofcanada.com in the show notes. I did fail to find the original account in the Pittsburgh Press, even with our handy-dandy old newspaper directory thing, but I found enough things of it that was an actual Pittsburgh Press newspaper, I'm convinced, even though I couldn't find it to verify.
Okay.
Which brings us to another highlight story of just a giant owl messing with people, and this one comes from the Pine Barrens Institute, and it will be read by one Jeremy Carr.
Oh. Owl encounter. Name, Daniel S. Age, 23. Number of witnesses, 3. Location of sighting, Wilcox Park, East Berlin, Connecticut. Date of sighting, around 2006. What you believe the creature was. A large owl, new species or hybrid. Message. I am a male, 23 years old now. This happened roughly around the year 2006. I was around 9 years old, and I think I was in the 3rd grade. I was in Richard D. Hubbard Elementary School, located in East Berlin, Connecticut. Every recess, my 2 female friends and I would venture past the playground into the field. We would stick around the edge of the field, along a fence that borders some woods and a pond. We were not allowed to go past the second light pole, so we would linger around that pole, talking, playing, looking at the woods and pond. One day, it was either late spring or summer because the canopy was green and the temperature was mild. We were walking out to the pole as usual. I was absorbed in conversation, but before we got to the second pole, my friend said, "Oh, look at that bird!" As I scanned the woods, my other friend spotted it before me, and was saying something like, "Wow, it's huge!" Finally, I noticed it, and it was huge. It was perched on a very thick sycamore tree limb, and its talons were nearly wrapped completely around the limb's circumference. It was so big, in fact, that it looked like someone cut it out and pasted it on a background that was too small. I immediately looked for its eyes. but I could not find this thing's eyes because they were evidently concealed by a face full of down, or very fluffy small feathers. I assumed it was molting season, and it was losing its winter plumage because it seemed to be too large to be a baby bird of any kind. Its head was just like that of an owl's, rounded with an indented V on its forehead. I don't remember the exact colors, but it was mottled with typical bird of prey colors, not one solid color. I had only been looking at this bird for maybe 2 seconds when there was a loud snap, and the limb it was resting on fell off the tree. I don't know if the bird had shifted its weight when we spotted it, or if this was just coincidence. Well, when the limb came crashing down, all I saw was a blur as this bird struggled to stay airborne. I think one or both of my friends may have screamed, but I was just taking this all in. After that very brief blur of flapping, it flew, mostly glided, directly toward us. That's when my friends took off running, but I stayed watching it. And as I watched it fly toward me, its yellow-skinned talons were outstretched as if to pounce. It really looked as if it was not going to stop. So I pulled away from my instincts and ran toward my friends, looking over my shoulder as I did. I distinctly remember the chill in the air as its huge shadow fell upon me. But at the last second, it pulled its talons in and swerved back up over the tree line, and it was gone, just like that. Now, while I was intrigued and grateful for having experienced this, I didn't think there was anything unusual about this. It was years later that I found out this couldn't have been any known species, as it was much too big, even to be an abnormally large specimen of a known species. The wingspan was at least 10 feet, probably around 12 feet. Its height was harder to ascertain because I didn't have a good reference point when it was perched up in the tree, but I would say it was between 3 and 4 feet tall. If I had known this was not a known species, I would have kept a tighter hold on the memory. Another detail I remember is that I think I saw the center, not the tip of its beak, amid all that fluff. If it was indeed the beak, then it had a yellow owl-like beak. Now, for a while I thought there must be a great forest behind that fence if there was such a big bird living there. But it turns out that it takes 1 minute to walk from the fence to some condominiums on the other side. I then tried to find the limb that fell and see if there were scratch marks on it, but I knew it would do little to prove anything. Discouraged, I went on Google Maps to find out what was in the direction it flew off to. I quickly found a place called Owl's Lair Cliff in Ragged Mountain State Park, which is in the exact direction it was heading.
That again from the Pine Barrens Institute. Now we're going to shift to the West Texas, out in El Paso, where we have our last highlight
Out
story.
in the West Texas town of El Paso.
Exactly. But we have the last one, and it's kind of a chase scene, and we're going to put Jeremy to work a little bit here and have him do another one. But this was a chase scene by West Texas Owlman, Giant Owl Cryptid Chases Hunter by Max McNabb, September 28th, 2022. It's from the Texas Hill Country website, which will be in the show notes.
The giant owl creature chased the pickup, clawing at the tailgate and scratching the metal. The hunters in the pickup bed screamed like little girls as the vehicle went full speed down the 2-lane blacktop. The white creature flapped its enormous wings, pale against the West Texas night. Evil red eyes shone in the darkness. It kept pace with the pickup, talons screeching against the tailgate. One of the hunters gathered enough courage to raise his rifle and pull the trigger. This is the tale of the West Texas Owlman. When a group of Texas high school students went out hunting rabbits one night, they couldn't have guessed they'd become the prey of a terrifying Mothman-like entity. I personally interviewed Jamie, one of the eyewitnesses, who's been a friend of my father's for 30 years. Jamie is an honest man, and everything he told me about his strange encounter had the ring of sincerity. In 1981, Jamie was a high school freshman in West Texas. One night he went out with 5 buddies to hunt jackrabbits. The friends piled into a pickup and drove out southwest of the small town of Sundown, Texas. They were driving around the oil lease, then called the Central Mallet Unit, when all of a sudden the pickup died. Here we go. Around 20 minutes later, the vehicle started up again by itself. Despite how strange that was, they were having too good a time to pay it any mind. Being young and dumb, Jamie said, we didn't think anything about it. They drove a little farther, then stopped and climbed out of the pickup, ready for the hunt. Carrying their rifles and lights, they walked out into the dark. After a while, they walked over a hill and looked down on a fence line 60 yards away. And that's when they saw it. Something big and white was sitting on the fence. They stared at it in the distance, trying to decide what it was. The creature looked like an owl, only 5 times as large. "What the heck is that?" Jamie said. The young hunters shone their lights on the white creature. "It just turned its head and looked at us," Jamie said. The giant owl's red eyes shone bright above its beak. It stared at the hunters, then spread its enormous wings 12 feet across, and they saw its red chest as the creature took flight. "All of a sudden, this thing takes off," Jamie said. "It kind of just started going towards us. Well, now we're scared." They ran back to the pickup, hearts pounding. Then one guy slid behind the wheel. Jamie got in the passenger seat, and the 3 others jumped in the pickup bed. The driver sped off, but they could see the giant owl creature coming after them. "This thing was following us," Jamie said. "The 3 guys in back were screaming like girls." It's a great line. The driver punched the accelerator, but the creature kept coming, gaining on them. Its huge wings were pale in the night, and its red eyes shone through the darkness. One of the hunters in the pickup bed raised his rifle and took aim and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The rifle wouldn't fire. I asked Jamie if he thought his friend had just been too terrified to flick off the safety or chamber around, but he didn't think so. He had the impression of something, an unexplained force, preventing the weapon from firing. The 3 hunters in the back of the pickup screamed. Now the creature was right on their tail. It was hovering over the vehicle, Jamie said. I mean, actually right behind us, just clawing at the tailgate and scratching up the truck. By that time we had got on the highway and it was still following us. I bet we were going as fast as that truck would go, and we're all pale and we're scared to death. The giant owl thing chased them into sundown. We finally swung into town. We flew into town, Jamie said, and a sundown cop was parked at the end of town on the south side. We passed him, and then he came right behind us. Never even turned on his lights. We turned off to go toward my dad's house, and the cop just kept going straight. He didn't stop us. I might have thought I was dreaming, but when I saw the cop didn't even stop us, he just kept going past, I knew he had seen something also. In sundown, the giant owl gave up the chase. They reached home alive but terrified. I was so sick, Jamie said. I couldn't go to school for 2 days. A lot of people didn't believe us, but other people had kind of seen something like that before out there, but nobody had really got that close or experienced it such as we did. We were scared to death. I don't know what it was. It's always been imprinted in my memory.
That again from TexasHillCountry.com in the show notes. And again, you gotta, I struggled. I really struggled. Even this one, which is just a giant owl chasing these folks, it's white, which is odd.
Yeah, that's
You've got the car not working. You got mechanical problems. You got the gun not working. It has these other elements where they really go creature-y, cryptoid just a little bit. But what they're describing as a giant owl, is the reality. So
I'm getting some interdimensional vibes here.
Well, that's what I said. With Big Hoot, I struggled, and I'm saddened by that. I have to say that. But I also have a bonus highlight story that I have. It's a missing bonus highlight story. We have a mystery on our hands, and maybe you can help us solve it. There's one account where someone comes upon a giant 5-foot tree stump in the woods, It's a bunch of hikers. Suddenly just twists his head to stare at the hikers. Now, I think I read this in the Big Hoot chapter again in Mark Hall's book, but I couldn't re-find it. This was a Moz fail, which is unprecedented here. I mean constant. But if anyone can get the details of that account, what am I seeing? We'll give them a mad Cujos.
There you go.
Yeah. Not even a provisional like the real one.
Yeah, just full on.
Yeah.
Not just me faking it again.
So monsterlatour@gmail.com. Be a real true paranerdalist. Get some mad Cujos. Let us know what the heck I read and why. That is our missing mystery bonus highlight story today, which brings us to best defense. I still have some theory stuff to do, but we're going to hit best defense. I would like to go first on this one and then give you time to think because you never do your homework. But stay inside at night, and you're less likely to run into owls. Day sightings are not unusual, but not as common either. Still probably a statistical advantage to just, never going out at night ever. Again, presuming this is a giant version of today's specimens, just a conventional owl, I think conventional weaponry would work. But my dream team would be, I just take Xena Warrior Princess. Her sword should do the trick for these harpies. And I'm going to need to borrow those night vision goggles on a semi-related note. But basically, that's my dream team. I'm just bringing Xena, and I'm just going to cower in the corner.
Xena's pretty good.
Yeah, that's what I'll stay in the chopper. We'll send Xena Warrior Princess.
I actually did think about this, though.
Liar.
Because something stood out to me in part one, where if you eat owl meat, you are impervious to drowning, right?
Yes, that was the dai of it was a Chinese legend, D-A-I, Chinese folklore.
So I'm going to find a Dai monk to feed owl meat to Bruce Willis's character from Unbreakable.
Wait, what?
Because his only weakness is drowning. So if that guy can't drown...
Because the puddle, they drown him in the puddle. Yep, okay.
Like, he's truly unbeatable.
He's unbeatable in less water. If you feed the Unbreakable...
I'm going to get a Dai monk to feed owl meat to Bruce Willis's character from Unbreakable to become truly invincible and fight the Big Hoots.
You just broke. Wow. You just broke best defense. You broke like Mecha Chuck Norris on that one. You broke best defense.
Mecha Chuck Norris got nothing on Undrownable, Unbreakable, man.
You beat Mecha Chuck Norris.
You don't beat Undrownable, Unbreakable. I'd put Bruce Lee up against that.
Wow.
Still lose. I'd put him. Or I should say, I'd put that up against Bruce Lee.
That might be your best defense ever. That makes sense. It ties things in. I'm impressed.
I almost feel like I wasted it on this, but it has to be now because it's owl.
Yeah.
He's got to eat the owl, so it's got to be against the owl.
Yeah. That's very good, sir. You clearly won that round, and I can't even... matter of fact, we're never doing best defense again. You broke the Unbreakable segment.
I didn't know it was a challenge. I just saved our asses from the Big Hoots, man.
Yeah,
that's what I did.
So I just wanted to talk about Xena Warrior Princess. You got to go thinking.
Well, see, if we can bring that dude, we just set him after the owls, and then we can just hang out with Xena
Warrior and
the Warrior Princesses.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're thinking today.
Yeah.
As for Us Files, most of the Us Files we have been shifted to an Us File Owlpalooza kind of episode at the end of this series in highlight cluster real form. I think we have more owl stories at this point, possibly than Skin
Walker.
That's the two arguments, and we'll let you be the judge. A lot of them have been, actually kind of happened recently. We're trying to develop a timeline, and we're going to discuss it in the sixth part of this amazing event that we're having here. But back to theories, because we're not done yet. Mark Hall has monopolized these. Surprise, surprise. He believes a likely candidate would be a giant owl again from the genus Bobo, as we have said, the guy who also looks for Bigfoot at night with Cliff and Renee. Here's Hall's quote, its closest relative would be the great horned owl in North America, ... or of the eagle owl family. So that's his thought. He was also among the first to point to Ornimegalox, the giant one that we found in Cuba. He's the first one to make that connection to Big Hoot. Why? Because it didn't die out millions of years ago. The largest owls ever found on Earth lived in Cuba a mere 11,700 years ago, just at that Ice Age.
Yeah, they were Ice Age creatures then.
Yep. And so
there's a lot of carryover from that.
Yeah, a lot of our creatures that are probably the most plausible, potentially the ones that died off around there, the megafauna that went with that. But we rarely get a chance to give these budding archaeologists anything to be happy about on Monster Lore Tour. So it's nice to actually have some real fossils, which we're going to get into here.
Yeah.
And this next section I gleaned from Arredondo's Great Predator Birds of the Pleistocene of Cuba, and that will be in the show notes. But this comes to our first reading from that thesis, and one of Jeremy's last, I believe.
Recent paleontological investigations in Cuba have shown that the island was formerly inhabited by large populations of rodents and edentates. Based on discoveries of giant fossil raptorial birds, strigiforms and accipitiriforms, thanks Maz, in Cuba and other Antillean islands, the theory is put forth here that these predators were the principal agents in controlling the abundance of these native mammals. Details are given of the discovery in Cuba of the gigantic owl, Ornomegalonyx, two species of giant barn owls, Tyto, a giant species of eagle, Aquila borasi, and a vulture, Antilovultur, similar in size to the Andean condor, Vultur gryphus. The relationships and possible origins of gigantism in these birds are discussed. Descriptions, geographic distribution, tables of measurements, and a list of the extinct faunas found in each of the type localities are offered for each species.
So the rodents of the island of Cuba grew inexplicably large, and so did all the ornithoids. We find larger vultures, we find larger eagles, we find larger owls. If you're a family of mice looking for a getaway, this is not the place.
No.
But here's some of those studies again from the highlights. This segment might not be news for many of you, but don't worry, we will dig a little deeper as usual for mandibles and other vertebrae. But this paper cites how in caves of Pardones and El Tonel in the province of Habana, they found, quote, tens of thousands of mandibles, capriomice, Pleistocynacus, giant rodents of the time.
Whoa.
GROFTTs.
So that's like the carcass pile where something was eating those things.
Yeah.
10,000 of them, huh?
But giant rodents related, of course, to the ROUSs.
ROUSs.
Yeah.
I don't believe they exist.
Well done, sir. Giant owls fighting giant rodents, though. That's got to be a great island. But these owls were massive, and they were busy little beavers. Actually, we found the origin of the giant angry beaver, if you recall, from
Oh,
Kustica.
yeah, we did, huh?
We
Episode 24, the Kustica.
We solve a lot of mysteries here. We really do. The island also housed a species of blood-eating vampire bat that enjoyed these jumbo mice as well. That wasn't creepy enough island for you to visit. There may have been one canid species on the island due to the limited fossil findings, but they do have a few skeletons from a dog running around there, too. So there was a Cuban kind of a dog, bear, wolf kind of thing running around. So giant owls ruled the roost generally. We're working toward that size here, which is pretty extraordinary. But here's some more excerpts from that thesis, as Arredondo, the Great Predator Birds of the Pleistocene of Cuba. And we're going to have a few readings from Jeremy.
The absence of mammalian competitors combined with a superabundance of large prey are no doubt the principal factors contributing to the gigantism observed in these birds. The larger forms may have functioned particularly to keep the populations of edentates in check. On 2 January 1954, the remains of a gigantic owl, the largest known, were discovered for the first time in the depths of a large cavern known as Pio Domingo Cave. Located in the Sierra de Sumidero, opposite Pica Pica Valley in Pinar del Rio, these bones were found in place, fastened to the calcareous surface of the floor by travertine, just as were those of the various edentates encountered in the immediate vicinity. This owl was described under the name Ornomegalonyx oteroi ... Additional fossils of this giant owl were later found in various caves in the provinces of Habana, Matanzas, Las Villas, and Camagüey, as well as in the Isle of Pines. 2 species of giant barn owls of the genus Tyto were discovered a little later. One of these, Tyto noelli, founded on abundant bones from 2 caves in Habana, was similar in size to Tyto ostologa of Haiti. The other species, Tyto riveroi, based on the distal portion of the tarso-metatarsus from Cueva de Bellamar, Matanzas, was truly gigantic, being larger than any of the fossil or living species of the genus. It is the one strigiform that most closely approaches the size of Ornomegalonyx oteroi, and like that species, could also have captured small edentates.
So basically there's these dueling monster owls there. The reason we went into some of that more specifically, and I tortured Jeremy with some of that
My brain
Latin,
hurts.
is that this is the fossils they found of these giant owls in Cuba, and they're truly, that's how we get to this almost nearly 4 foot tall with a kind of a longer leg and just these giant owls that were kind of
It shows how big it is, just the fact they put mega in the middle of its name like that.
Yeah.
Ornomegalonyx.
Exactly. And I looked up strigiform. Originally, when I first came across it, I was hoping there was a strigoi connection to owl vampires.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But strigiform is just, as we came across that, is just the order of the owl. You know, it's the owl, basically, because there's order, family, genus, and species. Right. It's just to get you there. Invertebrate or vertebrate zoology-wise, kind of get you there. But they found other large barn owl species and whatnot, but here's another piece of this puzzle.
Ornomegalonyx is truly exceptional for its extremely large size. It appears to have evolved its gigantism in Cuba from some remote smaller ancestor. An affinity of Ornomegalonyx with any of the living genera of large continental owls is not clearly evident, and its relationships may lie closer to some extinct form rather than with any presently living. ... 2 complete specimens from the same individual were found in a cave in the Sierra de Cubitas, Camagüey, along with other elements. The dimensions of these bones indicate the enormous size that this bird had in relation to all other known strigiforms, living or fossil. The tarso-metatarsus is almost double the length of that of Bubo bubo, or more than double if one considers the specimen from Cueva de Quinto, or that from Paradones. These bones are more than 3 times the size of the corresponding element of Nyctea scandiaca, more than 4 times that of Azio otis, and 8.5 times the size of Glossidium siju.
I just wanted to, again...
Oh, I'm sorry, there's one more line. AKA, these are damn big specimens. That was added on at the end there.
That was my notes getting into your reading.
I know, but I saw it and I wanted to read it.
There you go. But I'm going to bring it on home. I wanted to go a little bit more into detail from the study just to show you it was exciting to find things not that long to be, again, this other giant thing. And I do remember this from back in the day. Again, I read this a long time ago. This might not be news to anyone. I first read about it in Mark Hall, who was covering this, when I was a young man. But it's still, to go into the whole study and to read it, I think was really interesting. I'm going to sum up the last piece of this reading. From the actual and estimated measurement of the various bones of Ornomegalonyx, it can be established that this great owl stood some 1,100 millimeters high in life. Although the general aspect of its skeleton is similar to that of living owls, it is distinguished from them by the long and robust hind limbs, provided with long, heavy toes armed with the most powerful claws.
They were like eagles, but owls.
Yeah.
And huge. Like huge.
Yep. And ... the cranium and femora from Parodonus and the femur of the Sancti Spiritus being examples. Ornomegalonyx had to have been the scourge and terror of most of the larger mammals of the Pleistocene of Cuba, and the claws and mandibles of this bird would have constituted a terrible combination of superior destructive power. So 1100 millimeters comes in at 3 feet 7.31 inches, as we said in the beginning. And that is one of the few fossils, so I think it's safe to say, like we always talk about, may not be the biggest. They only have a few records of this. It's already a darn big bird. What if those were the runts of the litter, is what we always ask.
Yeah, right.
You know?
And I feel like with the fossil record, the odds of us actually finding the biggest outlier ones is so slim.
Right.
That we have to assume that the biggest ones we know of are not the actual biggest ones.
Exactly.
Like how we keep finding the newest, biggest dinosaur.
Right.
You know, every few years there's another biggest dinosaur.
Yeah.
Because we just haven't found the biggest ones yet.
And there's always a scully muggle saying they can't get any bigger, and that's why they don't get any bigger.
Yeah.
And just like with the Teratorn, they had 17-foot wingspan birds that, you know, before that, ornithologists were convinced you couldn't get anything over 10 or 12 feet off the ground, and then they find an 18-foot one that was clearly not a dodo or one of these. It was flying, and then they have to change their tune a little bit, just like the giant squid. And we'll have more victories in the crypto realms to come, I am sure.
Yeah, and you know, the fossilization process is so rare to begin with. If they didn't live in a place where fossils were, you know, commonly created, then they're not going to fossilize. And, you know, there's so much going against you. I appreciate the knowledge the fossil record gives us.
Yeah.
It's very important knowledge, but we have to realize its limitations at the same time and know that that's just what we have found.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and just like my missing bonus highlight feature of that owl, we have a missing piece to this, the wingspan, and the reason is the wings, the legs look taller and slimmer and longer, but the wings themselves seem to not be matching. So it does seem like it definitely made them think this is something that either flew in short bursts or that it did not fly at all.
Yeah, it would make sense that a big predatory bird, once it hits a certain size, wouldn't even need to fly anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like ostriches and emus and all those things.
Yep. And from the mythic anthropological side of these things, you know, those booger owl tales come from colonial pioneers of this country who spotted and reported giant owl sightings. And I'd love to hear more of those, but to me, a lot of them, you know, they either ended, either Mark Hall had a lot of leads from tribes I could not find, and I tried to track down every one of those. And if they did find more leads, again, they got more cryptoidy. Many encounters start off with just a giant owl, and then all kinds of fear and Logan kind of follows. So when the going gets weird, the weird turn on their GoPros.
Episode 18.
There. But more on those tales in the weeks that follow. Make no mistake, this ramps up into some powerful stuff. The owl does evolve for us into a story, into a tale, and steeped in meaning and even more mystery. So more to come. But I look back at the old 19-year-old me who picked up that Mark Hall book, and I think my favorite episode as a 19-year-old would be Big Hoot. And today, as doing this podcast decades later, I couldn't find as many giant owls. Everything got cryptoidy, and it's sad for the 19-year-old me. But at the same time, you don't go for the monsters you want. You go for the monsters that are there. Right. And there's this element there that needs to be dealt with, and we are going to deal with it because we were on the track of these creatures.
Yeah, it's interesting, the overlap you always find with these things. Is it owl, or is it something else? Or are we ourselves projecting the other thing onto the owl, or are we projecting the owl onto the beast because we're scared of the owl? I mean, there's so many psychological aspects you could go into to go with these reports.
Well, this triangulation. I mean, if you just look back to the flap from the Bronx, again, some people were reporting a gargoyle, some an owl, or some it was a more bat squatchy in a way. Yeah. And then you got the same thing when you look in Chicago. I looked through all those reports, And we're going to do that when we get to Mothman, but it breaks down to same weird triangulation, another city 660 some odd miles away, a century later, essentially.
Right.
So, but all that brings us to our Ahu Guano section.
Ooh, Ahu Guano theory of the week. Oh no, here it comes. Quick, to the batshit signal.
My Ahu Guano, since there's only a handful of giant owl sightings, and we covered most of them tonight, or a lot of them. I'm sure there's more out there. But, my Ahu Guano theory is based on that. The Scully Muggles and the non-believers who could not, they're the ones who have these sightings. If they see just a giant owl and then it turns into something else, the Scully Muggle or the Richard Dawkins of the world is the one who's not going to be able to process the rest of the mystical experience. So they're all crazy weird, but some people can't process it. Richard Dawkins would just be actually just losing his shit if he saw something like this because it doesn't fit into his worldview at all. But they're only going to come back with, I saw a giant owl. The rest of the mystical experience is going to be kind of ripped from their neurons and from their memories. And I think that's how we get the big owl accounts, is from the people who couldn't process the rest of the experience.
So you're blaming the skeptics on your Ahu Guano theory?
Yes. I think the few big hoots that are left were not able to see what happened after the owl showed up. It got weird, and they couldn't actually, they blocked it out. It's total repression, trauma-related stuff.
That's actually a lot like what I was just trying to say with the psychological aspect of it. Like, if you really saw an owl that big, is your brain going to start giving it other aspects, anthropomorphizing it and whatnot?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's big enough to be a person.
Yeah.
So do you start giving it person aspects that it doesn't even really have because you're just so terrified in the moment? Your mind can literally play tricks on you in moments like that.
Right. You're really stressed out, and then that Volkadanken of the culture of where you're from actually paints what that mystical experience looks like. This is why someone in the Philippines may see something different from those in South America, who might see something different from up near the Arctic. But it's the same mystical experience. It's just element Gedanken wise, as far as collective unconscious or psychoid level wise, then we're interpreting it as through the lens of our culture, and it becomes something related to some of the mysticism of the area.
Right. We get run out by a grounded giant predatory owl. In our mind, we turn it into an owl bear.
Right. Yeah. Because that might be your totem.
Because it makes more sense to us that way.
Or might be related to your totem. Might be related to
there you go.
Your own version of it. So Richard Scully Muggles, Skeptics Review.
You're full of crap, and that's the nicest thing that I can say.
Again, as for the Kikione, some ornithologists believe that based on the description of the call, it may be just a giant Pell's fishing owl. Or you can plug in a lot of what Mark Hall thought about with those different large existing species. Any Scully Muggle worth their salt would say, there's no such thing as owls, monsters, Mulder. The Mulder's implied, even if they don't finish with that. Seriously, an owl that stands 4 feet tall, which did exist not too long ago. And I think if you saw something like that, and people tend to get the sizes wrong. We talk about that a lot. Monster Quest did a thing with owls where they were kind of pulling along and they had owl cardboard cut out at the side of the road. People wildly kind of got these things wrong, and that's what Scully Muggles are always going to point to, is that people don't know what they're seeing when they're driving, and they can't judge size and wingspan and all this stuff very well.
And things unextinct sometimes. We've had a number of creatures we thought were long extinct. All of a sudden somebody's like, hey, there's one.
Yeah. No.
And I know the bigger they are, the less likely that is to happen, because, the harder it is for us to not come across them when they get that big. But, hey, there's a lot of remote places left in the world, believe it or not.
There you go.
There are places without the internet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There is another Scully Muggle moment based on George Eberhart's work of the Cornwall, England flap. He points out that why this was a questionable thing is that Doc Shields guy who kind of reported on it. And this is from Eberhart's, quote, an Irish magician prankster, Tony Doc Shields, who was simultaneously involved with the Morgawar sea monster sightings. So this guy had a reputation as finding monsters, and he had a reputation as being a little magician prankstery. So that factors in whether these folks were real. It did sully that Cornwall sighting stuff a little bit, just based on who was reporting on it. It's like us having an us file, and then our us file gets bigger just because we have Owl Week. Who's going to believe that?
Right.
Except we're not kidding.
Yeah.
Maybe Doc Shields wasn't to his credit either. I don't know that for certain. The Cornwall one was even if it was only reported by several kids, it seemed to be something that struck that Monwar church community pretty hard and for a long time. And a lot of people believe those kids, and I think we don't want to just dismiss. We want to take a page from Don Melling and believe.
Yeah.
And that brings us to our Wolfman Puck scale.
Our Wolfman Puck's Cryptid Culinary Corner.
Your entree, sir. Smells good.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to go first? Would you like me?
I don't even know what we're eating. Are we eating a giant owl?
I changed it a little bit here. I'm going to roast me some giant ROUSs from either old school Cuba or the Fire Swamp. Why am I doing this, Jeremy?
I don't think they exist.
I'm not going to eat any owls, even a fictional one. We'll be explaining later in the series why that is. But I also feel like there was a big theme of just serving rodents today. You may go either route with this, because sticking to the Wolfman Puck segment, you can certainly serve an owl. That would be more closely resemble what we normally do. But I'm making authentic Fire Swamp ROUS dish. I'm going to roast these giant beasties over that flame burst, the second danger of the Fire Swamp. And I'm washing that down with a nice IPA from Swamp Head Brewery in Gainesville, Florida. It's called The Big Noise, and I think these things make these big noises. And I think it all would just be a kind of a wonderful barbecue in the Fire Swamp that no one would return from.
All right. Fair enough.
Unless you're the man in black, of course.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to find a Dai monk to feed me owl meat, and then I'm going to go live with the octopus on the bottom of the ocean.
Dang.
And I ain't coming back either.
Dang. You're going to be the unbreakable teacher.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
My unbreakable teacher.
Yeah.
I like it.
That's my whole thing. I'm just going to have some magic owl meat and go live with the octopus.
What it really counts is you came up with something brilliant, and you can't do that twice in one episode. I think that's what just happened here. The die thing with the Bruce Willis was truly a wonderful moment.
Yeah, I guess I had to use it again, huh?
Yeah, you just couldn't.
I just had to use it again, didn't I?
No, I think you only have like one per episode. You can't be that smart that often. Okay. That's my Ahu Guano theory.
Fair enough.
But that's what I got.
You Ahu Guanoed the Wolfman Pucks.
I did. I kind of Ahu Guanoed everything on this one.
The MLT universe is about to implode.
Yeah, as usual, right? So
as usual.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think you kind of found the giant monstrous owl there in the end. That the fossil record almost makes it real.
If I did not, and I knew again, that wasn't new news, but I don't know if I would have done Big Hoot. I would have almost given up based on. But I did find several highlight stories that were close enough to just big owl sightings, and it's very intriguing to have fossil record only less than 12,000 years old.
Yeah,
and
Ice Age
of this
of
giant bird island needed to be discussed. So I enjoyed it.
Very cool. Thank you, Moz. And next week we do the Owl Lady, right?
Yeah, Lechuza and then Mothman.
Cool. First, we're going to do part 2 of the Side Trail series that's going on in conjunction with this. That's on a completely different topic because we want to keep a little bit of variety going as we go. So we're going to go do that Side Trail. Before you guys go, if you could just take a moment, hit those happy little fun buttons, whatever platform you're on, the like or subscribe or follow or share, some auto downloads so you get the new episodes when they come out is helpful for us with the algorithm and helpful for you so you never miss a stop on the Monster Lore Tour here. And
consider becoming a Patreon member because if we get a map for the Fire Swamp, we might actually survive the barbecue.
Ooh, there you go.
Yeah.
It's only $1 a month to join at patreon.com/monsterloretour, and I promise we will not spend the money on a map to nowhere. I promise. But, all right, we're getting weird enough. We're going to get out of here. We'll see you next week for episode 58, Owl Week, Edition 3. Till then, Have a good one, listener. Monster Lore Tour Podcast. I fell in love with a Mexican girl. Sorry, I had to
Who
finish.
turned out to be an owl shapeshifter. Things didn't work out.
Who was actually La Llorona, owl woman who ate my soul.
Lechuza. But there is a Llorona.
Shit, Lechuza.
Yeah. Lechuza
I
wisely.
really got to like study these things.